Hi, everybody, and welcome to Authors and Dragons Side Quest, the every other week thing we do when we're not playing D&D really, really badly. I'm John Hartness, and joining me tonight are Rachel Carr and Drew Hayes and Robert Bevan, and we have a special guest, one of the very few people we've ever had on the podcast that is the same height or taller than Drew Hayes. Please welcome five-time Bram Stoker Award winner, New York Times bestseller, general badass, and lovely, lovely human being, Jonathan Maberry. Jonathan, thank you so much for taking some time to hang out with us.
Oh, thanks, guys. It's a real pleasure.
Glad to have you here, man.
Glad to be here.
Yeah.
I'm squeeing internally. It may come out at any time.
I'm squeeing too, so we're good.
I'm pretty sure that with my upcoming medical procedure, I'm the one that things are going to be coming out of all night.
Different kind of squeeing, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
That's more squeegeeing.
That's tomorrow afterwards. But anyway, so what's new, buddy? I haven't seen you in a couple of years now.
Well,
Because, the world ended.
Well, the whole world went into the plot of one of my novels, so we've been dealing with that for 2 years. Yeah, I've been basically ankle chained to my desk, cranking out novels, comics, and short stories for the last couple of years. And during that time, I became editor of Weird Tales magazine, which I'm also doing and having fun with.
Yeah, I was going to say, and you decided to take on the editorial role and revitalize, I don't know, one of the most famous horror and genre magazines in history. So
yeah, we're coming up on 100th anniversary next year.
Wow, 100 years.
God damn, and in publishing too.
Yeah. Well,
For real.
it hasn't.
You look great.
Yeah, I know. I was a wee lad when we started, but it has died a number of times over the years, financially and some mismanagement at times. Different things have happened to it. Originally, they asked me to write for it. They bring it back, asked me to write for it, and I wrote a story. And somehow, in the process of after I submitted it, before we even finished the edits on the story, they asked me if I'd like to edit the magazine. And I was like,
"What'd you do?
You're asking me to edit Weird Tales. Let me wake up from this." The first issue I was editorial director technically. There was a name editor, but he was ill, so he didn't actually do anything on it. So I got to curate it myself. Now I'm the editor, and I'm having a blast. And even having an issue coming up in June, I think, with an Elric excerpt by Michael Moorcock and other things. The following issue, we have a cover story, a Hellboy cover story with art by Mike Mignola.
Damn.
I'm having fun. I'm having a whole lot of freaking fun. We got our Ramsey Campbell stuff. We got Brian Lumley and everyone else. So if this is a dream and someone wakes me up, I'm gonna fucking kill him.
And when Jonathan Maberry says he's going to kill you, it's not an empty threat. Like when I say it, I'm just going to maybe sit on you and smother you. But Jonathan, what was your first published book?
First published book was 1991, Judo and You, the judo textbook for Temple University, which is kind of funny because I'm not actually a judo instructor. I'm a jiu-jitsu master, not a judo instructor. But one of my best friends at the time was a judo instructor. He was a great teacher, just not a good writer. So he asked me to do the textbook. We were both teaching at Temple University. I was teaching women's self-defense, martial arts history, and jiu-jitsu. And I wrote my textbooks. I wrote his, wrote a couple other textbooks, but Judo and You was my first book.
I was just reminded of this the other day because I started reading Ink because, I don't know, I might feel like I can relate to the subject matter.
Tattoos? Yeah, just possibly.
A little bit.
Yeah. Oh, nice ink.
Yeah, James Tuck did it.
He's the man.
He does all my stuff now.
He was one of the guys I interviewed for expertise on the tattoo craft while researching that book.
Yeah, I can't think of anybody better because not only does he do great tattoos, also he knows how to write a book.
He does.
So, but when I was starting Ink, I realized, wait a minute, this is a Pine Deep book. So I went back to Ghost Road Blues, and I've started rereading the first three Pine Deep books. And in the intro, you were talking about how you had started writing this nonfiction martial arts book. How'd you make the jump from this is how you break someone to this is monsters eating people?
Well, partly, I mean, there's a little bit of backstory. One thing important to know is my grandmother was basically Luna Lovegood as an old lady. She believed in everything, ghosts, werewolves, vampires, everything. She was about 300 years old. I loved her. And so she got me involved in just knowing about mostly the folkloric side of monsters, not so much the pop culture version. And so I had a book deal in place. This is in the late 1990s. I had a book deal in place with a small publisher for 4 nonfiction books. I did 3 martial arts books for that publisher. And then the last slot was open, and I proposed a book about supernatural predators, vampires, werewolves, and so on. My publisher thought I'd lost my damn mind and asked me to publish that book under a pen name, which I did, Shane MacDougall. Long story behind that name. But the research had gotten me so interested in folkloric monsters that I kept looking for books novels about folkloric monsters, and there were not that many of them, at least none that I was able to find at the time. So my wife said, well, stop bitching about it and write the damn thing. So I sat down with the intention of just getting that out of my system, no intention of ever going into fiction as a career. I loved the process of writing it. I got an agent real fast. She sold it real fast. It won the Bram Stoker Award for Best First Novel, almost won for Novel of the Year, but I got beaten by 2 votes by some guy named Stephen King. You may have heard the name.
Once or twice.
Yeah, he's rubbed my nose in the fact that he beat me by 2 votes and that he has 2 sons who are voting members of the Stokers. It's like, nepotism. Anyway,
time to sign Rosie up, but
yeah,
get that dog vote.
She would be great. But yeah, that got me interested in fiction. And then I just fell in love with fiction. And I had never, ever taken a fiction writing class. I'd never thought I wanted to write fiction. And since then, I mean, that book came out 2006. I am now writing my 46th novel. I got hooked on fiction in a big way.
Yeah, damn.
I'm jumping all over the place, different genres. I'm writing comics. I'm writing short stories. I friggin' love the fiction. I wish I had started fiction earlier, you know?
Well, you know, you got to dabble a little, experiment in college, and eventually.
Yeah, that's pretty much the case. My first novel, though, didn't come out till I was 48. So that's, yeah.
So all these people who are thinking, oh my God, I haven't made it by the time I'm 30. Well, nobody on this podcast made it by the time they were 30 either. So,
see, when I was 30, I was teaching at Temple University, and I had just stopped working as a bouncer in the evenings at 30. So it was a different life for me back then.
I was building theaters and designing musical theater.
It's a lot more civilized.
Not really.
I was an accountant. Don't you talk about savagery, people.
Hey, well, I was actually writing full time.
Yeah, accountants don't get knifed as often as I would. You know, before I was a bodyguard. Before I was a bouncer, rather, I was a bodyguard. I've been stabbed with everything that has a point or an edge over the years. Chopped in the shoulder with a meat cleaver and all sorts of fun stuff.
What kind of bar was this?
No.
Yes. Hold on. We need to hear some more details about cleaver to shoulder.
Before I was a bouncer, I was a bodyguard. So in the 4 years of bodyguarding people, our company was only hired when there was a credible threat against an entertainer. So we were there to protect them while whatever law enforcement agency had jurisdiction was investigating. And most of the time, nothing happened. Sometimes something did happen. You have a really bad 2 or 3 seconds, and they get really bad. The meat cleaver one was not my favorite.
There's something that beats the meat cleaver?
No. But there are some that ice pick in the stomach certainly had its moments.
Ooh.
But unlike the meat cleaver, I still had a fight with the ice pick in my stomach. The meat cleaver, I was like, see you in the AR, guys. Bam, out.
Yeah, that's a good time to punch the ticket and be like, fuck this.
Yeah, and my partner, who luckily was 2 steps behind me when this happened, banged the guy who chopped me on every hard surface. It was in a hotel kitchen when we found this guy. And then he and I both went to the hospital in the same ambulance, both went to ICU together.
Wow. Are you sure this isn't a plot line from one of your books?
No, but I tell you, it has informed a lot of the way I write fight scenes. Because
it explains a lot of Joe Ledger, man.
Yeah, if my character gets a serious injury like that, unlike the movies where they keep fighting, like Denise Richards in the Starship Troopers gets this gigantic thing through her shoulder, and a few minutes later she's in a gunfight. No. You get chopped in the shoulder with a meat cleaver, you're done. You've clocked out.
Yeah, shoulder injuries are no joke.
Well,
and there's important arteries and shit right there, and the brachial artery is really close to the surface in some places.
As we discovered, yes. So yeah, there was lots of surgery, 6 surgeries to repair my shoulder, and fun times. Now the worst I get is a paper cut, so I'm good.
So you're saying that nasty reviews are just those tickle at this point?
Yeah, funny, I don't read my reviews, but I made a mistake I used to read my reviews. I actually made a mistake once of responding to a negative review.
Oh.
One of my books had come out, and in the same day I'd gotten a 5-star review saying best book ever, which of course you don't believe. Much as you'd like to have written the best book ever, you know it's not the best book ever. And then the review onto that was worst book ever. And it's like, it's not the worst book ever, you know? So I was in a bad mood, and I just responded, silly review. You'd have thought that I had just accused him of strangling puppies, because
you did. Oh my God, the Goodreads police must have been after you in seconds.
Well, this was on an Amazon thread, on an Amazon review thread. He went nuts on me. Everyone else went nuts on me. It got kept going on, and I kept trying to play it down. And finally, I pulled my comment. I apologized, even though it was a silly review. I apologized. But then Anne Rice decided that I needed a champion. So for 2 fucking years, Anne Rice argued with this guy on that thread, to the point that when she would do talks, she would have screen caps of it to talk, and I'm like, for the love of God, please stop. Because it kept bringing up all the negativity every time that book was searched on. So I don't respond to negative reviews.
This feels like amazing publicity.
Yeah,
there is a such thing as bad publicity. Yes. It just, I never ever get involved in those kind of arguments anymore. Even if I heartily disagree with the review, I let it go.
I was taught there was only one response ever for a review, good or bad, and that's thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the guy bought the book, so thank you.
Robert Bevan is the king of responding to negative reviews in hilarious and profane fashion.
I don't respond directly to them. I will screenshot them and put them on Facebook and respond there.
Had I been a little smarter, that's what I would have done. But, I was young and foolish. I think I was 52. So
oh, such a whippersnapper.
I was. I've learned so much since then.
I love that Bob's strategy is putting them more publicly on blast, and that's somehow okay.
I mean, it's a masterclass in.
I feel like it's kind of like
that's
heckling
not responding.
at a comedy club.
Yeah, I think nowadays though, I've got some really rabid Joe Ledger fans. I think some of them would take that person to task, but I'm not looking to start a fight. I want everyone to be happy. Read my books if you like them. Don't read them if you don't. We're all good.
Well, I've read quite a few, and I do like them. Can you talk, before we get to the main focus of the evening, which is promoting the new book, which is releasing what day?
May 10th.
All right. So releasing May 10th, available for pre-order wherever you buy books. But I want to back up to my favorite thing that you've written, because fuck it, I scheduled the interview. I get to do that. Let's talk Rotten Ruin. Where did that come from? Because that's my favorite thing that you write. I love that series.
This has backstory. So it goes way back to when I was 10. My buddy and I snuck into the movie theater in Philadelphia, where we live, to see the world premiere of a new film called Night of the Living Dead, October 2nd, 1968. And I loved the movie. My friend bailed halfway through it and had he was having bedwetting issues, I think into his 30s. I watched it twice. I loved that movie, and just huge zombie fan. I spent way too much of my life figuring out how I would survive various zombie scenarios. So roll forward to, I think it was 2008, maybe. Christopher Golden, who's one of my good friends. This is actually how I met him. Aside from being a writer, he's also, like me, an anthologist. And he invited me to write a novella for an anthology he was doing called The New Dead. And it had stories, I think, by Max Brooks and Dave Wellington and a bunch of other folks. What he wanted us to do was to write stories about zombies that were outside of our personal wheelhouse. Up to that point, I had never written anything post-apocalyptic, and I had never written anything with a teen protagonist. So I wrote this novella about a 15-year-old kid and his older brother living in a post-apocalyptic America, 14 years after the zombie apocalypse. And the older brother was teaching the younger one, who was reluctant to even work with his older brother, the ways of how to be a zombie hunter. And it was not your typical kill them all, sort of zombie hunting. There was a sensitivity to it. He would track down specific people who had turned to zombies, read the last letter from the family, and then, send the zombie on, end the zombie's life. And it was written as kind of a coming of age and a bit of a tearjerker, but it was written for adults. It came out in the anthology. It got a lot of really strong reviews. And my agent, who usually doesn't read short fiction, because they usually don't handle your short fiction, read it and said, well, this is the opening of a young adult novel. And my response was, no, it's not. Now, I had not read a young adult novel at that time since To Kill a Mockingbird in the 7th grade. So I had no idea what had happened to young adult fiction in the interim. She sent me a box of books, Scott Westerfeld, Cassandra Clare, Holly Black, people like that, DJ McHale. And I'm like, holy crap, young adult's awesome. So I agreed to let her shop it out. She took it to, she had got an auction going. Simon & Schuster came in as the high bid, and it wound up going from what was originally a novella that I had not planned any more of it to suddenly a 4-book deal. I just, as soon as I'm talking with the editor, after the agent and the editor make a deal, then that's when the editor usually has the first phone call with the writer. So I was talking to David Gale, the editor at the time, who has since passed, great guy. And as we're talking, he kept saying, well, that's another book. That's another book. I'm like, wait a minute. Are you talking about like sections within that book? He said, oh, no. After this call, I'm talking to your agent. We're gonna up the deal to 4 books. I'm like, wait, what now? And I wrote the book. I put my heart and soul into it. It's the zombie novel I wanted to read, but in my heart, it was the sequel to Night of the Living Dead, because it's that kind of a zombie apocalypse. And the book came out. It's required reading in thousands of schools now. It won a crap ton of awards. I wound up writing more books. There's now 7 in the series. And it is currently in development at Outcom Entertainment. They're at the script level right now. And they're hoping to make a series of movies out of it. And I'm like,
that's fantastic.
Wow.
Amazing.
Congrats.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun.
One of the sequels to this anecdote is some years ago, years after I started writing that, I became friends with George Romero, and we met on panels. We hit it off really well. And then I reached out to him one day about doing an anthology of short stories set in and around Night of the Living Dead. And 2 things happened. One, I had written Dead of Night and Fall of Night to explain the zombie apocalypse that is shown in Rotten Ruin. Even though Rotten Ruin was for teens, those books were for adults. And I dedicated to George, but had not talked to George about those books. In that first phone call, George said, oh, by the way, Dead of Night's my favorite zombie book of all time. I'm like, wait, what now? Because say that again.
Wow.
I think I'm having an acid flashback or something. What?
Nice.
Wow.
And he said, yeah, I read it several times. I probably bought 50 copies and given it out. It's great. And I'm like, holy shit. And he said, if we're going to do the anthology, I have one real, well, actually, he had 3 conditions. 1, he wanted to co-edit it with me. Did not expect that. That was awesome. 2, he wanted to write a story for it. Again, awesome. But his 3rd condition was, he said, there's a character who appears in the 2nd book in the series, in Fall of Night. He said, I love the character. I wish I'd put him in a movie. I want you to take that character, write a short story that brought that character from the end of that book and bring him all the way to the house in Night of the Living Dead. And we're going to put that story in the anthology. That character is the older brother of the two characters in Rotten Ruin. It's Sam Amora.
Holy
And,
shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's the point at which I told him about Rotten Ruin. He said, well, can you send me some copies? I'll read them. He read them and he said, well, as far as I'm concerned, this is the sequel to Night of the Living Dead. And we were actually talking about doing books together that would be set before and after. And unfortunately, he got sick and he passed. So that never happened, but his love of those books and the fact that in Dead of Night, I actually came up with a almost workable way for zombies to be created, because he admitted that his whole thing about radiation from a returning space probe actually does not hold any scientific water at all. It's not ever going to happen. So I had gone with parasites as the base of it. And we had so much fun working on the stuff together. But that's how Rotten Ruin got started. It was kind of a weird, complex history, but it's my favorite young adult stuff. And the fact that I brought my character Joe Ledger in book 3, and he's in the entire series, and even Sam Amora returns in book 6. I just had so much fun combining my different literary worlds into one mega story that George Romero loved. And after that original call with him, by the way, when he told me it was his favorite book and he wanted me to write this, I must admit, after the call, I ugly cried. I did.
Yeah.
That's
Good time
legit.
for it.
May also have been doing the Snoopy dance while ugly crying. This is a weird visual that may stick with you for a while. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Rule number 1, don't visualize.
Mhm.
So I've told you before and said here, I love those books. My short story in My Batteries Are Low and It's Getting Dark for Zombies Need Brains that came out a couple of years ago is my homage to the Rotten Ruin books.
Crap.
Because it's set in a post-apocalyptic world with zombies, little sister, big brother. And at the end of the short, Quincy Harker makes an appearance, a la Joe Ledger, coming into the Rotten Ruin books. So that was me paying tribute to one of my favorite series.
Cool. Well, this is going to come as a little bit of a surprise. Actually, would have been an email you'd be getting next week, but I'll tell you now. I'm actually going to invite you into the next Joe Ledger anthology, Joe Ledger Unbreakable.
Wait,
What?
We're doing a second Joe Ledger anthology, Brian Thomas Schmidt and I, and you're on my list of people to invite into it, but the letters were going out next week. So I'm telling you now. I'm going to force
Spoiler alert.
force you to say yes right now.
So holy shit, yeah, I'm in.
Okay, good.
Wow. Yeah, somebody else asked Jonathan a question while I process for a second, because this is a big ass deal for me, and thank you so much. I'm thrilled.
I just think it'll be so much fun to have you, either bring one of your existing characters in or create something new, but write a Joe Ledger story, and you'll get the information via email in the next couple of days.
Holy shit, that's incredible. Thank you.
That's amazing.
But-
Congrats, John.
Congrats,
Yeah.
John. This is awesome. I just want to eat popcorn now and see what else.
You've done a bunch of anthologies and a bunch of comics work. And then there was this little thing that you did that kind of got bigger and crossed genres, and something about vampires and wars and
V Wars, which
Yeah.
started out. So here's the story on that. IDW, the publisher, had Max Brooks. You know Max Brooks is, right?
Yeah.
He had done an anthology, he edited an anthology of G.I. Joe stories. They're, the America's hero.
Yeah. Larry Hama.
Right. And so Max had invited me into the anthology. I wrote a novella for it. And Max couldn't do the next anthology. He was originally going to do 2 or 3 anthologies, couldn't do the next one. And so the people at IDW asked him, well, who do you think would be a good person to do the next one? And he said, Maberry. So, Max is a cool cat. He's a nice guy.
Yeah.
And I slipped him $5 to do that. Just saying. Anyway, so they asked me what I would like to do. And I had an idea for a Joe Ledger novel that wasn't workable for Joe Ledger because it would substantially change the world for good. But it was an idea I really liked about melting polar ice, releasing an ancient disease that triggers dormant genes, and some of those genes code for this physical symptoms that are what we believe are vampires, fangs, and so on. And so it's not supernatural; it's genetic science. And that I said I wanted to do that as a shared world. I would do like a 40,000 word novella, 40,000 word framing story, and then I would invite writers to come in and write individual stories, and that became total of 4 V-Wars books and 3 runs of comics. And IDW around that time created its own media division, so they went out shopping it and they wound up selling it to Netflix. And unfortunately, it launched right before COVID started. So right around the time where they were getting ready to decide whether to renew or not, they're like, "Oh, a show about plagues. Should we do that or anything else?" So
yeah,
that killed it.
Yeah.
If it had come out a year and a half later, when COVID was starting to dip down, it would have sold.
Yep.
So Ian Somerhalder, the star of it, who was the star of Vampire Diaries, also one of the coolest cats in the world, good friend of mine. We get the rights back around the end of the year. So he and I have been conspiring on what we want to do with those rights once we get them back. So he has an open invitation to shop at the HBO Max and Amazon Prime and everyone else. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a very different version of the show than it'll be closer to the books than the original show. A lot edgier, darker, with more of an attack on intolerance and racism than the show did.
Yeah, because I don't remember that really being a thing in the show.
The show was fun, but the scripts were written by Canadians, and they're very nice people.
Okay.
Americans are not as nice. The V-Wars books are not nice. They're we take some real shots.
Well, that makes sense, given that our mutual friend James Tuck is in one or more of those books, and James does not write nice people.
No, he does not. But
by the way, his Deacon Chalk books are coming out again.
Oh, cool. Love those books.
Me too. That's why I bought them.
Oh, awesome. So you're publishing?
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. I love that.
Yeah. The first novella and the first novel are out, and we're doing one a month until everything that exists is already out.
If you need a cover quote for any of those books, I love the whole series. Be happy to give cover quotes because I love the books. I've read them each a couple of times and recommended them a lot. So yeah, I'll be happy to support Jim in any way I can.
I will absolutely hit you up for that because
cool.
They are awesome. So Kagen the Damned. This is a new Maberry for me.
New Maberry for me too.
Okay, what's the deal, bud?
Okay, again, it comes with backstory. See, you interview writers, you get backstory.
This is why I literally came up with 3 questions for this interview, and I figure that will get us to an hour, which is one more question than David Weber gets when I'm moderating him on a panel. I only ever plan for 2 with David.
Yeah. Well, so again, backstory. In fact, you can probably see it behind me. Right there is a copy of the old Lancer edition of Conan the Wanderer. Right up where my finger's pointing.
Conan.
I fell in love with the Conan stories as a kid. Lancer was reprinting them when I was, in grade school, gobbled them up. But my connection to Conan is weirdly deep. And I say weirdly because the connections are kind of like almost crazy supernatural. So first off, my middle school librarian was a secretary for 2 different clubs of professional writers, one that met in Philly and one that met in New York. The New York crowd I went to and I got to know Richard Matheson and Ray Bradbury and Harlan Ellison and those guys. And that was just awesome. I mean, the Philadelphia crowd where I grew up was mostly anchored by Sprague de Camp. Now, Sprague is famous for having been given a trunk full of unfinished Robert E. Howard manuscripts. And he rewrote some of them to be Conan stories, and he finished others that were unfinished and so on. And he brought Conan back. And there's a lot of argument as to whether his Conan stories are good or not. I liked them. They weren't Robert E. Howard, but Robert E. Howard committed suicide in the 30s, so we can't get Robert E. Howard again. But without Sprague, Conan would not be a word any of you would recognize. Because he brought them back to reprint the originals and rewrote and so on. And he became a friend and mentor for years and years. And in fact, I've even put some photos up of me and Sprague at his house. Well, when I first started dating my wife, woman who became my wife, I was looking through a photo album with her, and she's like, "Why are you standing with Uncle Sprague?" Now, turns out not really an uncle, but he was such a close friend of her grandfather that he was known as Uncle Sprague. And her grandfather was Oscar J. Friend, who was a literary agent, anthologist, editor, and pulp fiction writer. And his agency, the Otis Klein Agency, Otis Adalbert Klein was the owner of it, and then Oscar bought it when Otis got sick. They represented the Robert E. Howard estate. He's the one. Now, Glenn Lord claims to be the one who to give the unfinished Conan manuscripts to Sprague de Camp. Glenn was an assistant who literally just drove the car from Brooklyn to Philadelphia. Oscar gave him the manuscripts. I have all the files from their agency. I've got all the notes. I've even got the original typescript manuscript of People of the Black Circle. Got the original in those files. Also, Cool Air by Lovecraft. So that's weird. But so my wife's grandfather was involved in the original Weird Tales. He was a talent scout. He was the one. His clients included Manly Wade Wellman, Isaac Asimov, Bradbury. He sold Bradbury to Weird Tales.
Ooh.
And now I'm the editor of Weird Tales, and my editor for my novels called me out of the blue and said, "Hey, do you have any interest in swords and sorcery, epic fantasy?" And I'm like, "A little." and he said, "Well, we're expanding our list of stuff we do in St. Martin's Griffin, one of the divisions of Macmillan." And he said, "Can you pitch me an epic fantasy story?" And I said, "Sure." So, I happened to be at my computer. So I typed up something, an idea has been floating around for years and figured I'd never do. Sent it to him. Within 2 hours, we had a deal for 2 books. It was like weird. I have a great agent, by the way. And the story, Kagen the Damned, it's set 50,000 years from now. Our world has completely collapsed to the point that nothing from our era is even a memory. It collapsed down to barbarism, crawled its way back up through ice ages and everything else. The level of culture and technology is kind of your generic Witcher, Game of Thrones, medieval-esque. The only things from our era that actually are kind of remembered are the fact that 2 of the 3 dominant religions, one is the religion of Cthulhu, and one is the religion of Hastur, known as the King in Yellow, the shepherd god. And there's another one that I created for the book. So there are actually 3 warring religions and so on. So I got to include Lovecraftian stuff in it. I got to create a character who is, he's the captain of the guard who is, his whole job is to protect the children of the Empress. He wakes up drunk in a prostitute's bed while the city is being invaded and the imperial family is being killed and the children are all killed. So that's pretty much the opening of the book. It's not even a spoiler. So
Bad day at work.
Yeah. So the gods of that culture turn their back on him because he failed to protect the next generation of the empire. He literally sees his gods appear and then turn and walk away from him. Ooh. So he's damned.
Okay.
And his whole thing is he needs to destroy this villain known as the Witch King. He needs to destroy him out of revenge and maybe to save his own soul. And things go badly awry. It is my longest book. It's 176,000 words. So it's a nice, juicy. I love the world building in it. I had so much fun with it. I created new cultures, new empires. I hired Kat Scully, who's this.
I love
Kat. She did a great map for me that's going to be published in the books, and I love me a map in books. Conan always had its map, and I just wrapped the second book, Son of the Poison Rose, which is the second of the series, 207,000 words.
You are getting close to Drew Hayes territory.
Well, it's certainly the longest I've ever.
Well, close though. Drew, what is superpowers for?
450,000 words, I want to say.
You need an intervention. There are plenty of 12-step programs.
I was a little bit stuck by the trappings of the way the series was structured. I had to make that the final book. And I had to do the story well, so I was just like, well, this is gonna take however long it takes.
Yeah.
Yeah, when
Um,
you're doing
Man, my
superhero
150
college,
feel tiny.
yeah.
yeah, when you're writing superhero college, you kind of get 4 books out of that.
One for each year, I assume.
Yep.
So Kagan, it comes out May 10th. I'll be launching it. I'll be going back to the Philadelphia area to launch it, Doylestown Books. And I love the cover art for one thing. Also love the cover quote. I don't know if you guys can see the cover quote.
Oh, Michael Moore.
Rich and original. If you hunger for more George Martin, this novel will thoroughly satisfy you. By some guy named Michael Moorcock.
Yeah, whose books I've been reading since the 60s, who's notorious for not giving cover quotes. And my editor reached out to him without me knowing it and asked if he would read it. And he said, the equivalent of, okay. And his pattern in the past is to read 2 chapters and then send a scathing note of rejection. And he went radio silent for a couple of weeks. Now he's about 400 years old, so you got to factor that in. And then we get this cover quote, it's a fairly long quote, and he loved the book. And I'm like, what? I still, every time I see the cover of the book, I'm like, what? And then we got cover quotes from James Rollins, Kevin Anderson, Robin Hobb. It's like, holy shit. I still don't know how to process it. It's kind of weird. What's that?
Take the win. I think.
Oh,
that's
take
how
the
you
win.
process
Yeah.
it.
You got a murderer's row there.
But here's the thing is, I am not one of those ego writers who thinks, it's all about me or, I'm all that shit. I'm a book nerd first. So I grew up reading Michael Moorcock. I have read at least 50 or 60 of his books. His Dancers at the End of Time, one of my favorite fantasy series ever written, love the guy's writing. And I was hoping to at least meet him at some point, which I still haven't done. And now he gives me a cover quote. So on the strength of that cover quote, I decided to say, hey, Michael, any chance we could get you for Weird Tales? And he said, well, I just finished a new Elric novel. How about an excerpt? I'm like, yeah, that'll.
Yeah.
And then
I'm in.
Yeah, and then Neil Gaiman gave us an essay about Michael Moorcock to use in the same issue. So again, if somebody wakes me up from this coma,
Whoa.
there will be some physical damage.
Now
Did
the
you
book
win
comes
a
out.
bet with God? Is that what happened? I'm just trying to figure it out.
I don't know.
He was really, really nice in a past life, and this is the payoff.
Yeah, well, it's weird because I've had a lot of bad stuff happen in my life. I grew up in an abusive household and grew up poor and everything. But along the way, I've been fortunate enough to meet and make friends with some of the people I love, people who I admire so much. Matheson and Bradbury, that's a pretty hard one for even me to beat. I became friends with Stan Lee. I became friends, when I was writing for Marvel. There's a funny story about that too at some point. Became friends with George Romero. I talked to his wife almost every week, his widow. It's freaky. I never expected as a writer to become friends with the people whose books I read. It never occurred to me that was a thing.
Yeah. Is that not the weirdest? That's like the
So
biggest adjustment for me is when there was a moment at Dragon Con a couple of years ago where I sat on a panel and I messaged probably Rick that, look, I've done a lot of conventions. I've done a lot of Dragon Cons. I don't get very shaken by being on a panel with big names.
Mm-hmm.
But when I sat down between Kim Harrison and Mercedes Lackey,
Yeah.
which are the 2 of the people I was reading when I decided to start writing, that was a big day for me.
Yeah.
And Misty's wonderful, and I haven't met Kim. I don't know Kim real well. She was very nice on the panel and afterwards, but
Yeah, and
Yeah.
One of the nice things is there are more good people in the writing business than jerks. You hear about the jerks because that's a story that people tell, but there are more good people in this biz, and that really, surprised me. I got to tell you the Stan Lee story though, because
Yes,
Please.
yes, you do.
and it comes with visuals. So I'm at Comic Palooza in Texas. I forget which, Houston or Dallas, I forget where it was. And, we had the autograph row. We each had our booths. Walt Simonson and his Louise was next to me, and they're just the sweetest people.
Oh, she's wonderful.
Right across the aisle from me is the entire cast of Rocky Horror. And that's cool because Patricia Quinn, who played Magenta, her grandson loves my Nightsiders novels. And so there's a photo of her coming over to buy one of my novels and taking a photo, and that's awesome. But as I'm standing there, I see a little tiny person surrounded by 4 guys who make me look small, walking toward me, kind of like 4 versions of the mountain next to Danny DeVito. If you get the idea.
Yeah.
It's Stan Lee. And he comes over to my table, and I'm like, he's clearly at the wrong table. Walt Simonson's over there.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Hi, Walt. Hi, Louie." Anyway, so he comes over to the table, and one of his bodyguards slaps down a whole stack of this comic. It's the graphic novel, Captain America: Hail Hydra. It's one of the comics I did for Marvel, right? A whole stack of them, and I'm like, all right, is this going to be him complaining about stuff and throwing a book at me every time he makes a point? And he says, "Here's the thing. I like the book. Now, in the book, by the way, my version of Captain America: Hail Hydra is not the version where it turns out Captain America was actually a Hydra agent. No. My version was a 5-episode thing where each issue was in a different era of Cap's career, from World War II all the way up, with a different art team for each book, matching the styles of Kirby and Buscema and so on. And great covers by Adi Granov, who's just amazing. And he said, I like the way you did the book. I like the story. It's great. He said, I'm going to have you sign these, and I want to sign them, and we're going to put them on eBay and make some money for one of my favorite charities. What do you think? And I'm like, of course, yes. And he said, I got to tell you, I've got a nickname for I love the book, but I got to tell you, the cover. And he says, my name for that cover, and I got to look at again, is the Crotch of Liberty. Because that's what I say.
Yeah.
Captain America: Crotch of Liberty. Come on, you're with me now on that. I'm like, now I can never not think of it as the Crotch of Liberty. And we signed them, and we talked, and we had a wonderful time. And I had invited him to a party I was going to throw that night in my room for some of the volunteers. He couldn't make it because of the, he had to leave, but then there was a thunderstorm and planes were grounded. So he shows up at my room and sits there and tells these young volunteers who were, just 3 hours worth of stories about the comic book world, as he's sitting there pulling all the vegetables off the pizzas that I had ordered. And all these kids are like, and they're all like taking photos and everything. And I'm sitting there like, pulse is still beating. This is interesting, because I would think this is dead, and it's kind of like, nicest guy in the world. And every time after that we saw each other, it was, hey, Jonathan Crotch of Liberty. So when people hear that, they think it's Jonathan Crotch of Liberty as a name. Explanations were then given. I'm just saying to anybody, but what a great guy, So
that needs to be your nameplate. That needs to be your nameplate at conventions.
Yeah, it should.
Crotch of Liberty. Yeah. And I have a friend also from Marvel who said he's not positive, but he's pretty sure that the whole America's ass thing from Endgame was inspired by Stan Lee with his Crotch of Liberty thing, because apparently he told everybody about it on the sets whenever he would do a cameo. And the artist, Andy Granov, people have come up to his booth and asked if he has the Crotch of Liberty, because he sells posters of his covers.
Right.
And he's like, please don't call it Crotch of Liberty. But yes.
Forever it shall be known.
Yeah. But yes, I do a Crotch of Liberty poster here. It's $50.
Yeah. If somebody's coming up with cash money, call it whatever you want.
Call it whatever you want. Testicles of freedom, whatever,
Right.
They'll sell it to you. And I still get royalties on the book, so we're all good. Weird life.
Yeah, sounds like.
Well, what was your favorite comic to write, since we're on the subject? Because I know you've done a ton, including like Black Panther, the zombies. I mean, what do you love?
Well, the Black Panther run was really a favorite of mine, because my father, who was like an asshole of epic proportion and ran the local chapter of the KKK, and who told me that all Black people were mindless morons and so on. To give you an idea, He threw
Wow.
he threw a party when Martin Luther King died because he said that was a great day for the white race. So that's the kind of
Wow.
environment.
Whoa.
Jesus.
Yeah.
God damn.
And it was because of T'Challa's appearance in the Fantastic Four comics that I found out about apartheid, racism, Jim Crow laws, and everything else. I took the comic to that same librarian, by the way, the world's greatest librarian, and explained what my father's views were on that. And she said, this comic's about apartheid, and this issue was about, it changed the course of my life. So writing Black Panther, and Reggie Hudlin, who had been writing the book before me, had heard me tell that anecdote on a radio interview when I was working for Marvel. And when he was stepping down, he went to Axel Alonso, the editor-in-chief, and said, I know we wanted to get a Black writer to follow me, because it had been Christopher Priest and then him. But he said, T'Challa saved this guy's life too. He changed his life too. Why don't we have him come on? And because I had been teaching women's self-defense my whole life, and I had mentioned that during the interview, he, at the end of his run, he decided to have T'Challa injured. So sure, he had to step up to be the Panther. He gave me the feminist Black Panther to write for 2 years. Reggie Hudlin is the coolest guy in the world. And so that was my favorite thing to write. I had so much fun with that. My second favorite thing to write was a bizarre comic I did for IDW. The estate, the widow of George Romero, had said, look, there was a script George was working on when he died called Road of the Dead. It was going to be his last zombie film. Somebody else finished the script, and the guy who they brought in, I'm not going to name names, it is the worst script ever written. It makes Sharknado read like Hamlet. It is that.
Hey, Sharknado is rather Hamlet-esque.
It is a really bad script.
I almost said that with a straight face.
The premise is that they find a way to reverse the zombie plague, and the first thing that comes back for some reason is the zombies' ability to drive cars. So naturally, they think stock car races, because that just seems like a logical thing. It was such a bad thing. So the estate asked me to write a prequel to it that would give at least the storyline some legitimacy. So
wow.
And by the way, the movie will never be made, and we can all be thankful of that.
Thank God.
So I wrote Road of the Dead, Highway to Hell, and I had a blast writing it. And it was my last comic, next to last comic I did for IDW. And I just had a blast, had an absolute blast doing it. So those are my favorite comics to do. And my first one, which was a Wolverine short, Ghosts, was my favorite short comic thing I did.
So 40 something novels.
45 in the can, 1 in works.
45 novels, hundreds of comics, dozens of anthologies, hundreds of short stories.
132.
132 short stories?
Not hundreds, just 132. As of Monday.
Well, give it to
Okay.
the end of the week. You might hit 200.
Yeah. So what's next? What are the goals? What's left?
A lot of stuff still to do. I want to keep writing these Kagen books for as long as they're, the editor will buy them. I've fallen in love with the character. I'm about, as soon as I finish, well, I'm doing a series right now with Weston Oakes. Wes Oakes is a good friend of mine. He's a great writer. And he and I are doing a series of 3 futuristic deep space military science fiction novels called Sleepers. He did the first pass. I'm doing the second pass. We're going to keep back and forth until we finish it, having fun with that. So I'm doing that one now. After that will be the 13th Joe Ledger novel, that series, plus the Joe Ledger anthology, Joe Ledger Unbreakable. I'm editing a Deadlands anthology based on the role-playing game. I did a Deadlands novel, and now I'm doing the anthology. And Weird Tales, we have 4 issues being edited simultaneously. The next novels I'll be doing after the ones I just named, Weird Tales also just signed a deal with Blackstone for its own imprint. And it's called Weird Tales Present. And a bunch of writers were approached. Even though I edit the magazine, I still had a pitch, for novels. And I went up closing a 3-book deal for a kind of a new shared world thing called Dark Worlds. The quick premise is we go way across the galaxy. I mean, we were able to do instantaneous travel, but it takes longer to get back because we have to build the gateway to come back. So we're kind of stuck out there for a while. And
Oh,
we
cool.
find out that creatures like Cthulhu and so on had come to Earth because they were afraid of what's out there, and we just rang the doorbell.
As you do.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that, and Kevin Anderson's going to write at least one book in that series. I'll be writing 3. And but we have other writers doing other books for the imprint. Some I can't name most of the names yet, but it's going to be fun. And they're going to do, the new imprint's going to do 50 books in 5 years, and it's a pretty aggressive publishing schedule. But you know, I like Blackstone, and I'll just keep writing whatever my agent sells. I've got 7 books sold that I haven't written yet, so that's about 2 years worth of work. So we're now planning what to do in 2025 in terms of books.
Yeah, I just sent out a contract today for 7 books, the last of which is to be delivered in 2025. So yeah, we're, you know, you got to work out to figure out what you're doing.
You do. I mean, this is my job, it's my day job. Plus I have an assistant I pay. So I've got income, my own income and her income to oversee. I live in California, which is not cheap. And I have, I'm no longer poor. So I want to make sure that I stay no longer poor. And just want to keep doing this job, because let's face it, the job description, professional daydreamer. I mean, we make stuff up for a living and get paid for it. How is that not the greatest job in the world?
Yeah.
Other than professional dog petter or something like that.
Yeah, that would be better.
But I can do that at home because my dog sits on my lap sometimes when I'm making notes. So I love the job. I love being my own boss, and I love playing in all these worlds. And also I get to play in other people's worlds through media tie-in writing.
Didn't you do Aliens versus Predator, or did I imagine that one?
Yeah, that just came out, Aliens versus Predator. I co-edited with Brian Thomas Schmidt. I somehow became the president of the International Association of Media Tie-in Writers. He's involved in that, and I do not remember agreeing. I just remember everybody celebrating it later on. I'm like, wait a minute.
You missed a meeting. They hired you and they elected your ass.
Again, martinis were involved. But I've gotten to work in the True Blood world, Hellboy world, John Carter of Mars, Sherlock Holmes, Chud. I did a Chud story.
Like Chud 2, Bud the Chud level of Chud?
Yeah, I did a Chud story. It was so much fun. And I've gotten to work in like dozens of worlds created by other writers, and I love it. And, with the Joe Ledger anthologies and V-Wars, I've been able to bring people into licenses that I own, which means I, give my friends work and get to see what they're going to do with things I've created. I love sharing my toys. So yeah. I'm having an absurd amount of fun, and I'm happy as a clam. So,
well, we wish you nothing but greater and greater success, because
too.
As your friend, I want to ride those coattails as long as I can.
The thing is, there's so much room in this playground. Some writers make the mistake of saying that it's a competitive business. It's not. There's a lot of room for new talent, a lot of open doors, and all of us who are in the business got here because somebody helped us along the way. And I've mentioned several of them. Why the hell wouldn't we want to bring more kids into the playground, especially the weird kids, because they're the ones that are fun to play with,
For real.
Yeah, I don't want the stuffy kids. I want the ones who are as oddball as I am. And so I love being able to play with my friends in all of these weird interlocking worlds. And I can't imagine a better job than this.
Neither can I, because we don't have to wear real pants.
I forgot what pants are.
Yeah, there's no proof I'm wearing pants now.
No, there's not, and we'll leave that as a mystery. Like the ending of
Crotch of Liberty, folks. Okay.
Just as mysterious as the ending to Kagen the Damned, which you can pick up next month wherever you buy books.
Actually, also, if anyone pre-orders it, you can go to, I'll put the link up again probably tomorrow. You get a signed book plate that goes in there, and that's fun too. I'm actually going to be signing a big stack of book plates. And
does it say Crotch of Liberty?
It does not, though. Boy, that would be
You'll
tempting.
have to get that signed yourself.
I
face to
have
face.
had people bring the Captain America graphic novel to me because they've heard about that. Several people tell that story, asking if I could sign it Crotch of Liberty, and I'm like, I am happy to.
Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I don't want to keep you too long because it's getting on towards dinner time where you are. So
It is. And I'm going to be, this is going to be a weird thing. There's a show that George Romero turned me on to that is the least likely show that he would love and that I would love. And I'm only watching that while I eat my dinner. Believe it or not, Project Runway. He was a massive fan of Project Runway. And I figure if George Romero can watch Project Runway, I can damn well watch Project Runway. So I'm going to have a big salad and watch Project Runway and say hi to George up in whatever weird heaven he's in.
well, when in doubt, just do like Tim Gunn says and make it work.
That's it. Make it work.
There you go.
And choose
All
thoughtfully.
right.
All right. Thanks for having me on,
Well,
guys. This was great.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank
This
you so
was,
much, man.
Fascinating.
Thank you. I'm still squeeing. It's just subsonic at this point.
Talk to
Yeah,
the
so am
doctor
I.
about it. Yeah.
And for all of you out there, thank you for listening. Join us next week for another regular episode of Authors and Dragons, where we screw up the entire role-playing industry, all one critical fail at a time.